I'm the cowboy that came here from Texas.
We're back, another episode. Tell me you're joking time. This is actually a redo, but we don't need to get in the weeds of the why. Just know that we are going to perfect this conversation the second time around.
There we go.
Joining me today is Republican candidate from Missouri 2, in line to challenge the incumbent, Ann Wagner, Kirkwood resident through and through, Mr. Ryan Sheridan. Thanks for coming back in, man.
Yeah, JB, thanks for having me again.
No problem. Rolling us in here, just kind of having a little bit of fun because, on Spotify on Fridays, and we're recording this on a Friday.
Sure.
It's New Music Friday, right?
For sure.
There were a couple of new albums that came out today. There's the big one.
There's the big one, and I listened to it on the way here. Don't tell anybody.
There's the big one from Kelsey's girlfriend. That it basically is sucking all the oxygen out of the pop culture space.
Sure.
And way over on the other end of the spectrum is the Ghost of Country Past. There's a new album dropped today called Songbird from Waylon Jennings. Shooter, his son, dug into some archives, probably some old Wranglers or Boots or somewhere where there was tape, put together the album, and
Cool.
I figured I'd throw that out there too. Because I didn't. Tay-Tay just doesn't strike me as appropriate for the conversation that we're about to have. Would you agree?
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Would you?
I'm a Taylor fan through and through, though. That's the thing. But that's not really popular amongst Republican voters.
Well, hold on, though. Here's my take on that. I would call bullshit. They just don't admit that they are Tay-Tay fans.
True.
Because there's, everybody has vices. Right.
Well, I wouldn't call her Vice. She's very talented.
I would have to call her Vice. If I did like her music, I would have to call her Vice because everybody that knows the rest of my taste, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? So anyway, enough of wasting people's time on useless pop culture nuanced trivia that's going to be dated shortly. Brought you back in. The first conversation we had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I asked you to come back in, and I'm happy we did because I wanted to refine our conversation a little bit along the lines of what you're doing now.
Sure.
That being said, go ahead and take 60 seconds. I'll put you on the clock.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do a little bit of a resume, a little bit like, I'm Ryan, I'm from, you're in the circle and somebody just handed you the chip. Time to talk.
Okay, cool.
Where are you from? What do you do?
Yeah. Born and raised Kirkwood, lived in 63122. Almost 32 out of my 36 years. I went to Mizzou, went to Goldfarb, BJC for my nursing, finished up my degree with doctorate nurse practitioner at Missouri State. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I own a private practice. It's largely telehealth based. Also do real estate investing and development around the St. Louis area. But St. Louis is home, always been, always will be. Okay,
so you are a talk and walk, which was kind of my favorite part of that part last time. Telehealth individual, meeting with people on the psych side. But you're also in real estate development. None of that really makes sense as it pertains to wanting to run for office because that requires a certain amount of masochism. So why run? What drew you into this race and what are you looking to accomplish, just 10,000 foot view standpoint?
Sure. Yeah. I would say that those actually are really relevant. I like a lot of variety in life and politics is no exception. My interest in politics is largely my interest in people, of which providing housing and working with folks on their health. People is the center of those two rings. But I see the country at a precipice really, at a point at which if we do not prioritize future generations, my generation and generations younger than mine, the American dream will fade and it will be unattainable for perhaps ever, but certainly for generations years to come.
So motivationally speaking, because, when any and all politicians, when they think about who they're doing it for or what they're doing, there typically is groups or there's like a focus as to who the base
Mm-hmm.
or the target constituent is. The vast majority of institutional elected officials like Ann Wagner tend to look at the donor class. They tend to look at her peers,
Mm-hmm.
and there just doesn't feel like a focus on the true next gen. You kind of implicitly said that, in your description. How do you envision the potential of, let's say potentially you win this seat? How do you see yourself kind of balancing the needs of the old and then hyper focusing on what you view as a pathway to better for the new?
Sure. And when you say old, you mean older generations?
Sure.
Okay.
We can, boomers or old Xers,
Sure.
people that are not in the kind of need, for the most part, that this next generation
Right.
coming out of school are.
Yeah. The funny thing about that is I truly believe sound economic policy and fiscal policy not just raises the tide for younger generations, but also older generations. There's no excuse for fiscal irresponsibility in our coming from our federal government. And that is really the crux of the problem, regardless of demographic, regardless of age group. We see it with Social Security. I mean, if we do not solve the Social Security insolvency in 7 or so years, the average cut's going to be $8,000 or more. So we solve the financial responsibility problem. That helps seniors. We solve it. It doesn't saddle our future generations with that.
So the term that's typically thrown around in econ circles, or your CNBC in the morning, or people that are in the diner trying to move on from being immunology experts, K-shaped economy. K-shaped economy is kind of that MBA term for an economy in which you have growing wealth, growing GDP production, et cetera. However, you have a large percentage of the population that is on the lower leg of that K. When you think about kind of just the generic economy, right, and the haves and the have-nots, what is your simple message, without an individual having to go to your website and reading a bunch of policy wonk paperwork that they are never going to read? How do you describe and how do you address this separation between have and have-nots, the wealth gap that is accelerating in America?
First and foremost, the Republicans and people that identify as conservative must recognize and swallow the reality that there is a wealth gap. That's something that on the right we've been resistant to. But we can't address the problem until we accept that the problem is real. That's something I talk about patients all the time. If you don't accept you're an alcoholic, you're not going to improve your circumstance, if you're an alcoholic, for example. But the reality is the wealth gap is widening because the younger generations do not have access to ownership, and that's ownership not just housing, but just ownership generally, in the wealth creating portion of the economy, to the same degree that older people or older generations too, generations before ours. And that's a function of a lot of things, and we don't have to go necessarily into the nitty-gritty details, but largely it's because they're saddled with debt. Everything costs more as a percentage of their income compared to their parents. And the opportunities that they're given professionally or whatever job they may have are not as robust as their parents' generation. Say they take the job, they get a job out of college. If they went to college, the chances of them being able to rapidly accelerate to the same degree that their parents is just not as robust.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm gonna get into the weeds of the fiscal side from maybe some of the policy notes from your site, and here just a little bit. Let's stick to kind of the entry into this particular race, and your opponent, Ann Wagner. She's been in for a long time now. In full transparency, I'm a Missouri 2 voter. I live in Webster Groves, and I'm on that side of the curvy line between Missouri 1 and Missouri 2. Me personally, being a nerd in the weeds on this stuff, that being politics in general, I've noticed, and I've been extremely frustrated with, forget about our policies, but really just a lack of engagement within the community. I know that's something that you are promising as a candidate to be, the polar opposite from her. Take a second and talk about accessibility and what you view your responsibility to constituents within the district if in fact you were to get the nod.
Sure. Accessibility in today's day and age with technology the way it is, there's no excuse for a representative at any level not to have very robust means of communicating directly with their constituency via social media, via media outreach, via direct contact with their office and otherwise. So I will absolutely implement the best constituent services of any member of Congress. I can promise that because I built businesses that have used these systems to
Telehealth.
Yeah, exactly. And something you can go onto my practice website see is I promise to be the most accessible provider you've ever had, and I give you multiple means of contacting me. Now, obviously, we can't implement that with constituents, but there's no reason we can't have that on a more fine-tuned scale where if you reach out to my office, you get a response from a person quickly. That's unacceptable in today's day and age where you have AI capacity to help you decipher spam and not spam and generate responses. There's no reason you shouldn't have a response within a matter of days from any means of contacting your representative. And if you're a representative, your biggest job obviously is legislation, but it's also constituent services. That's what you're there for. You are the go-between between the people and the government.
How much of your run stems from just a personal interest in wanting to get involved in politics? You know, and that's a pretty big leap to go after a U.S. rep seat. How much of it is kind of ingrained in you, a desire, versus an opportunity as you see it, or maybe opportunity isn't the right word, as you look at Ann Wagner, how she operates, what she's been able or not able to do within the district, and really the perception of her as a, quote, representative of the people. Which side of that coin was more of the driving force to push you into the race?
That's a really good question. I think it's equal and perhaps different at the same time. So I have a lot of interest in crafting good policy that will impact particularly healthcare. I mean, I see the shortcomings in our healthcare system, and I see the shortcomings in housing. So those happen to be the two biggest expenditures that any one person has, is their housing and their healthcare. So I have the desire, and I believe I can be useful in that space. But I absolutely see an opportunity with our current representative, who is just completely absent, has delivered in zero ways for the constituency. And so it's sort of the meeting of those two. There's this opportunity and my belief that I can be useful that come together.
So here's the thing about her in particular, specifically starting in 2016 with Trump's initial election. Mm-hmm. It really seems as if Ann herself doesn't have a lot of positions.
Correct.
It feels as if she was an early buy-in to kind of the MAGA train, whether being get on or get primaried.
She in 2016 she flip-flopped on Trump a bunch, and throughout his presidency, so she's not consistent with that. She has really bought onto it over the last couple of years because it's the brand is
it's do or
powerful. Die. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's where I'm going with this, because whether or not she was an independent representative that was representing conservative values as what she ran on, wherever those might have went, they're not there anymore.
Correct.
Her position, her values are lockstep with the administration in D.C. Well, Missouri's a hell of a lot different than what's going on in the Capitol. In Missouri, too, has a wide gap, a huge delta of haves and have-nots, both economically, healthcare-wise, educationally speaking. How do you view yourself as far as your responsibility to the party proper? Because that's what everybody is seeing. If you challenge the party, you will have the full force of MAGA coming at you in your district, versus being true to your district as a Republican candidate. Where's the difference?
Yeah, I think I use the term America First as my primary entryway into what the current Republican Party platform looks like, because I think it tells you more of the story. I will be authentic in my principles, and those are things that I intend not to compromise. Some things like fiscal responsibility, things that the current representative ran on. I like Trump. I'm glad he's president. I will not be afraid under any circumstance, no matter who's president or who's leading the party, to challenge where I think there's a difference in my philosophy or my principles. What you see in a lot of representatives today is that they're more interested in being that show horse and not really doing it their job. They just are there for the power. And
They want to raise money.
sure. And so that's when you become an empty suit, and your objective isn't to serve the people, it's to serve yourself and your self-interest and soak up the power of that comes with office. And while I would argue that my opponent, it really isn't a show horse because she doesn't do anything, but she certainly does bask in the light of the power.
So let's talk a little bit about, you just made a statement that you like Trump, that you like that he is president. Polling across the board today shows that he's underwater on a lot of fronts, from big, beautiful bill that's almost 30 points under favorability. Every single demographic that he had made progress in, for the Republican Party in the election season, that being African-American men, Hispanic community, non-college educated, even women. He's given back all the gains based on recent polling. We now are sitting in, a shutdown battle that, in spite of the narrative, polling says almost 60% of Americans believe this is the Republican Party's fault because they are the party in power. And we can get into nuances later.
I'm not a huge believer in polling generally, but I hear what you're saying and I understand.
Yeah.
And depending on the news source, we can debate some of that. But I get your point that the sentiment is maybe the tide is turning on the president.
Well, I think I'm an aggregate guy. If you look at Pew, if you look at University of Michigan, if you look at Fox News polling, and if you look at all of them across the board, it doesn't matter where you go. Short of OAN network, in which they will say he's 98% favorability rate, your delta is usually plus or minus 5 points.
Yeah, I tend to use Real Clear Politics aggregate to see kind of what it looks like there.
Yeah.
And he's pretty consistent with, he's actually better than his first term and at this point in his presidency in terms of approval rating.
Well, but better still means he's well below 50%. His approval rating he's not gotten above 42%. That's if we look at broader averages.
So what I've seen, some of the polls that I've seen on Real Clear Politics, and we don't debate. I don't think debating this is necessarily important.
Right, because here's where I'm going with this. You like the president.
Mm-hmm.
Let's even just give the points up to where it's a 49% average. That still means the majority of Americans are not happy. So how do you, moving forward in this campaign, where do you draw the line between you focusing on Ryan Sheridan, the candidate for Missouri, to compare contrasting against Ann Wagner,
Mm-hmm.
and then the need and this kind of magnetic force that the Republican candidates all over the country are pushed through, that being to fall in line with the MAGA narrative?
Sure. Yeah.
Where are you on that spectrum?
President Trump endorsed my opponent in July, right after I announced at the behest, or after my opponent begged for it. She's the only candidate that Trump endorsed that had a heritage score in the 70s. So she begged for it. We know she begged for it. I have folks in the White House who mentioned she begged for it. And that's a good thing for me because you know what? That's out of the way. And I can be the candidate I want to be. I'm not here to seek anybody's endorsement.
Too bad your name's not Ann, because he could have said, I endorse Ann.
It's true. It's true. But the thing is, I look at this like my mom, my dad, my grandmother, whomever. I love that person. I like that person, but I do not agree with him all the time. And I will bring that same energy. And I don't think Donald Trump, at the end of the day, in a outside the social media and media sphere, really cares if you agree with him all the time. If you're generally seeking to advance the America First agenda, which I think there's a nuanced way to do that delivers for voters and delivers for constituency that the vast majority of Americans in the middle will agree on.
Yeah, kind of looking at the big one is really the big beautiful bill, because this thing is going to be rolled out over time.
Sure.
Which I think is kind of part of the.
Of course, but that's politics. I mean, and I am thankful I didn't have to vote for the bill because I don't really like the notion of having to eat a crap sandwich to get some good things you want, and it's really disingenuous. I know people might pin this on the president, but I actually pin the shortfalls of the One Big Beautiful Bill on Congress, squarely on Congress. If Congress was a functioning body, House and the Senate, regardless of party, that the bill could have been better. It could have been.
But doesn't that fall right in line with what I was kind of alluding to, in which you have this A or B option within Republican Party politics, in so much that option A is you are going to fall in line with MAGA and everything that's coming out of OMB and the White House, et cetera. This is our mandate, their own stated mandate. And then there's the option B, which a very small minority of actual Republicans are taking that path, like a Thomas Massey, even Rand Paul at times, but Josh Hawley.
Yeah, sure, but I'm not. But it's not just a Republican thing. I mean, the reality is leadership in Congress for now decades has chosen to use the reconciliation process as the only means of crafting meaningful legislation.
I agree.
That's a problem. And if we weren't doing that, then I personally think that the president's agenda could have been racked up in a way that people would have agreed with a lot of it.
Do you think the big beautiful bill should have been one big beautiful bill, or should the multitude of facets and different industries that were affected and different policy pulls, should that have realistically been broken out into a more truly specialized individual bills, assuming Congress
I am
did its
absolutely
job?
in favor of single issue or similar issue bills being stacked together. I think it's very disingenuous for the legislature to abdicate its responsibility to actually do their job. They don't want to show up to vote. They don't want to have pressure to.
They don't want to work.
They don't want to work, and they don't want to vote on things that might look bad on them. So if you put it all in a kitchen sink bill, they can vote on it and they can say, "Well, I voted for this," and even though half the text nobody ever read.
Okay, so you say that here today. Let me just ask you from a caucusing standpoint, because if you were to get the nomination and if you were to happen to win the fall election and you become the next representative from Missouri 2. Speak to the constituents into the future. Are you going to be fighting for single issues?
Yes.
Or are we going to rubber stamp a big BBB Part 2?
I am not a rubber stamp for the party. Will never be. If I wanted to be a rubber stamp for the party, I would have started in a local office and then worked my way up the ladder, sucking the party teat to become a molded in their image. I think that's very disingenuous to what it means to be an elected leader, and it's problematic because it grooms career politicians. It eliminates free thinking, and here's how I would deliver this message to the President Trump, or anybody else for that matter. I will champion much of your agenda that I agree with in single issues in a way that all Americans can agree on, and we will rack up wins that way. But I am not necessarily going to get on board and eat a crap sandwich because there's good stuff in it.
So let me ask you this then. Since Inauguration Day, I just looked at this last week. We're at a ridiculous ratio of executive orders compared to previous presidents that at that time, the public stated and politicians stated they abused their powers.
Yes. Again, this is Congress's. They have abdicated all of their authority.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this. How would you? What is your strategy? Because you, in order to run, you have to envision yourself winning,
Sure.
and if you did win, you have to have a strategy that you intend on applying. How do you intend to go to market as a potential winner to point out? This is executive order overreach. We need to do our job. We need to break these bills out. We need to figure something out with the filibuster. We need to quit relying on, passing a continuing resolution
Sure.
or passing a bill and then allowing the rescission process to just dismantle it all.
Sure.
What's step one?
Step one is you have a number of folks that are in agreement. You build a coalition. You can't get anything done on an island. You can see that with Thomas Massey. You build a coalition of people, and I don't really care what letters behind their name. You build a coalition of people that say, this is how we want to govern. And then you start working that. So let's talk about this from a local perspective. If Ann Wagner believed in anything, why are you not writing bills that reflect that? Why has she never had a legislative accomplishment in her entire time in Congress, save for a human trafficking bill that if that is your single issue that you want, I mean, I think there's a lot of good parts of that bill, to be honest, but there's also some bad parts. But if that is what you believe in wholeheartedly and you're going to hang your hat on for what you've done legislatively, where the hell are you on all these Epstein victims?
Well, that's where I was going to go with this, because you know that I know this. Ann Wagner has made that her billboard
Yes.
focus, human trafficking. She has refused to sign the discharge petition. She has refused to comment on it. She has refused to condemn any of those that have been charged, imprisoned, like Maxine. She has avoided the largest, the most popular sex trafficking ring for the most powerful individuals in the world. She's avoided it. What would your position be if flip-flop, let's say she's sitting on the bench and she's doing her day job as grandma, which she probably does right now. Discharge petition comes to you from Thomas Massey, the guy that doesn't caucus with Republicans. He says, this is the right thing to do. Do you sign it?
I sign it. And it's not just Thomas Massey. It's a growing chorus of people. You see Marjorie Taylor Greene. There are some principled folks that say, hey, wait a second. There's probably a lot of damaging stuff in this file.
So there was a special election a couple of weeks ago in Arizona that basically has provided the Democratic Party with the potentially the 218th signature, and the Speaker Johnson had told he wanted to delay it. He was waiting for, well, we need to make sure that election was real. The woman won by 18 points or whatever it was. It was a landslide. But now all of a sudden he's like, no, we're ready to go ahead and, oh my God, what do you call it whenever you read somebody in as a new representative? Swear in. Thank you. And they did it really, really fast. And there was a pundit that said, you know what? I'm worried about this. If he is willing to bring her on, knowing that that is the 218th signature required to get the full Epstein files out into public, the theory is they got to somebody. How will you react? What would be your, let's just say it's a preemptive statement. Let's assume Luna in Florida or Mace, or no, not Mace. Yeah, Mace.
Mace might do it, yeah.
If one of them flips and that thing sticks at 217.
Mace isn't going to flip. She has nothing to lose. She's running for governor.
Let's say somebody flips, Luna in Florida. She would be the obvious one. What is your position? What's your statement in regards to keeping the Epstein files closed?
I'm in favor of the sunlight there. And I really like APL in Florida. It seems to be on the right side of a lot of issues that I agree with. I don't see a circumstance where I could be flipped. It's something that so much of the Republican base and so much of just the general public want to have the light of day. And for better or worse, I trust the president that he believes that it would be damaging in some way for a lot of people and probably damaging for our country in some way, but I don't see it getting better over time. I see it getting worse. And if we look back at every sort of conspiracy that the government has attempted to in some way cover up, over time, it only creates more doubt. It only creates more problems. I think the sooner we get ahead, with whatever is in there, the sooner we get over it and process it, the easier it's going to be to handle something like this in the future, and the more quickly the country is going to be able to heal from this. Because at this point, it's a stain on the country.
So, yeah, you know what? I don't want to talk about Epstein anymore, because I think it's one of those things that we all have a fairly clear conscience as to what and who we believe are on those lists, and we're participating, whether they have short-term memory or not. It's not good. And it's blue team, it's red team,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
global leaders, et cetera.
Yep.
So let's move on past that.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about current event, that being the government shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get in the weeds of what's going on, but long story short, there's a continuing resolution that was not signed by the Senate, didn't get to 60 votes within the Senate. What's your kind of simplistic summary statement on the state of the shutdown cause?
Yeah.
Go for it.
CRs are BS. And the fact that we have a government that chooses not to clean up their finances is the reason we have a CR. We shouldn't have them in the first place. We should have a government that lives within its means. Should have a Congress that does what it needs to do to make sure that's possible. That's reality. So again, squarely falls on Congress because they have for many, many years chosen to say, I don't care about fiscal responsibility regardless of party. And so many Republicans run on this and then they just turn around and forget about it when it comes time to vote. So doing what's hard is not always what's easy. And they need to do the hard thing, even if it means pain, which is finding a way for our government to live within its means so that something like a CR doesn't have the potential to wreak havoc economically through our country and through our government every year. I mean, it's a show, it's a sham, it's truly ridiculous.
Why do you think the party of, quote, fiscal conservatism, historically stemming from the Reagan years, has repeatedly failed to execute a budget, an economic strategy?
Because they're not actually fiscally conservative in any shape or form. The vast majority of Republicans in Congress do not care at all about fiscal responsibility. That's evident.
So let's talk about blame here. I want to hear your take on the shutdown. And we can talk about the core reasons or what the argument is, but just give a summary statement. I know you put some videos out recently trying to address it.
I mean, I blame Republicans and I blame Democrats. There's not one person that can be blamed for this because it's truly a function of a system that's entirely broken and they're all complicit.
Do you like and how do you react to, for example, the president has instructed his government agencies to put on their websites, they took the websites down because, quote, the government shut down. They say this is a democratic shutdown. Do you agree with that kind of narrative and the approach in trying to sell said narrative to people that are really looking for services?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of rhetoric and this kind of political gamesmanship is only going to accelerate. And the more President Trump is a master troller. I mean, he knows exactly how to.
But should he be? Should the most powerful, most important individual in the world when it comes to government and politics, should he be trolling individuals with memes?
Whether he should or shouldn't be.
No, I mean,
but here's the problem.
You can't. Should the president of the United States
it works.
Engage? I'm not asking if it works. I'm asking if you believe it is morally, ethically, and operationally appropriate for
There's
the president.
nothing morally, ethically, or operationally appropriate going on in Washington, D.C. I do not think the president is doing anything more than. I mean, if the thing is that kind of games, I would rather the president post a meme or do something nasty online than do the crap that these people do behind the scenes. They're all the vast majority of politicians.
Well, but he's putting his nastiness.
Yeah, but it's surface level stuff. It's not. He's not.
So the Death Walker video that he put out today, the AI video of Russ Vought walking around as the Grim Reaper in anticipation of firing hundreds of thousands of people is what they want. These are families. These are people that have kids in school and they have groceries they need to buy. That's okay to you, is my question.
It is a gamesmanship. It is gamesmanship. But see, this is the thing.
If politics were ever going to change, why is it so hard for either side to admit that the people that are on their side are fucking up and doing stupid shit and embarrassing? And it's not there. Is there not a thin red line?
It was passed years ago.
So that means that we should just ignore it?
If you can give me a plan of how it goes back in the box, but I don't see it happening.
Well, the back in the box would be, okay, Jeffries and Schumer, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring in C-SPAN. We're going to bring in the cameras. We're going to put a camera there. We're going to sit across the table. And we're going to let the American people see exactly what we're debating. Right?
Sure, let's do it.
Wouldn't that be the adult professional way to do it? Isn't that actually the art of the deal as opposed to a meme?
I don't have a problem with that. Let's do it.
But why is it so hard for Republicans to condone their leader for doing it? Would you be okay with a business partner doing it to a client?
I generally am just not offended by that sort of stuff.
But most humans are.
But so I can't remember who said it, but it might have been Eleanor Roosevelt, something to the effect of, don't be offended and you won't be offended. I'm really butchering the quote, but
That's not where we're at, though.
But the problem is,
She was referencing like Mark Twain style
sure,
jabs.
I get it. But the point is,
Putting Hakeem Jeffries in a sombrero and alluding to illegal aliens, stealing from us, that's racism.
if you're asking me, am I going to do that sort of stuff? No.
But at some point, you talk about Congress not doing its job.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't part of the Republican Party, Republican members' job to keep their, quote, leadership in check with condoning and or not condoning acts like this?
When was the last time Congress did anything effective like that?
So this is one of those things. This is what I hear from other parents. Parents always say this. It's little Johnny makes a mistake, and it's like, well, he didn't.
But this is the culture we have, though. So you're asking a symptom of the culture to not exist, and that's not how it works.
President Obama never put memes out.
No, but do you think that I would rather somebody put memes weren't a thing back then, but I would rather somebody be completely honest and say the mean thing in public than go behind my back and work against me in a devious night in a nasty way.
What about option 3, where they just don't say the mean thing?
Okay, but that's not humans.
Sure it is.
The vast majority of people are going to gossip. They're going to say something, and that's just so we have to get over it.
So we need to accept being defeatist when it comes to character?
I don't think it's defeatist.
There needs to be accountability. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's a core tenet of the campaign.
Are you okay with, for example, during this particular shutdown, the language, the narrative that is being thrown out there is that it's all about funding, they want to fund illegal health.
Well, so they would like an extension of the ACA tax credits that were expanded under the Build Back Better bill during COVID. So and here's the problem. That was supposed to be temporary.
Sure.
And I don't like, I'm not a fan of the CR in the first place. So,
but if they do turn it off,
you'd be in a difficult spot to get me to vote for the CR in the first place.
So if they turn it off, I think the aggregated average as far as what the potential increase in premium would be for those that are on the exchange would be in excess of $4,000 a year. Some would be in excess of $10,000.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, and yes, those are big numbers, but at what point do we say we have to stop putting Band-Aids on this solution? Every time we create a subsidy, doesn't matter what it is.
Well, wouldn't it be better for humanity to address the military budget as opposed to healthcare?
Sure, but that's not even on the table right now.
Shouldn't it be?
Well, I'm absolutely in favor of taking a look at every single budget and making the necessary cuts to get our budget balanced, but we don't have leaders that are interested in doing that.
Well, let me ask you this, because the knock on the Democrats, justifiably so, since the election is that they were rudderless, that there was no real leadership. Mm-hmm. When people are asked who's the leader of the party, mm-hmm. there's a huge question mark that jumps up.
And I still think that that's true.
Yeah, I agree. And yet here we are in a position in which, for 8 months, the term mandate, this sweeping wave of, support for MAGA, et cetera, was the claim that's been made, and that the Democrats don't have any say. They don't have any power. And here we are in a shutdown in which they exhibited power. Mm-hmm. Because now there's an extended conversation regarding healthcare and the potential of what will come down the pipe if the current budget and these current expirations were to be allowed to occur.
But don't you think the way that Washington works, where they purposely make these things temporary so that they inflict pain down the road, don't you think that's a problem?
I'm on your side there, 100%. I'm also in favor of balanced budget amendment.
Yes.
And I'm in favor of banning stock trading by,
yes, 100%.
Because Mark Wayne Mullins, yeah. Did you see his trade the other day?
No. Was it
United Healthcare, big buy, big option.
Of course.
And that's not ironic, given that when this expires, who wins?
Healthcare.
Of course. So I guess here's my thing. When it comes to the shutdown, when it comes to narratives, how are you, as a potential House of Representative, going to be different? Because the crew that are full-blown MAGA, that are all on board, they're retweeting these AI memes where Russ Vought is the Grim Reaper. Where are you on that?
Where would I be retweeting, Russ?
Like messaging. What would you say to your constituents? Because constituents are
The
getting
exact same
mad.
thing I'm saying here. You should be mad at your government. You have every right to be mad at your government. Your government is failing you. CRs and the fact that we are not being responsible with how we legislate is why we're here. Don't be, I mean, you can dislike the memes and all that, but that is not really the core of the problem. It's a scapegoat. It's an easy thing to point to say bad, bad, bad. But the reality is be mad at every elected leader has chosen to put us here to get us to this point today. Because that's where the problem is. And until we fix that, we're just going to see the same thing over and over again.
So if I piece together some of the talking points that you've put out in your descriptors and the things that matter to you, you let off with, Republicans need to admit there's a wealth gap.
Sure.
That's a populist statement, full stop. You talk about housing. There's a shortage,
It's a crisis for sure. And
housing is a big flag in the ground for the Democratic Party as far as like what they really, really focus on. And I'm just kind of there was a number of things here, but in our last conversation, I want to bring it back to that kind of frame of reference. I'm trying to figure out where you're going to fall within the spectrum that is, as a Republican. Where are you on that spectrum? Because there's obviously, the super far right that's in line. Doesn't matter what he says. That's my vote. And then there are the masses that are kind of weirdly, on the other side of the spectrum. But when it comes to these things that you're talking about focusing on, wealth inequality, housing, etc., that isn't really a D or R issue. That is a have and a have not. Talk about describe your place on this spectrum, whether it is an east-west spectrum of left to right, where do you fall, or is it a north-south of rich versus not? Put yourself on this grid if you were to describe where you fall in this landscape.
Yeah, the term I like to use is compassionate conservative, and that is we use conservatism to serve the people first and foremost. And what we have right now is a quasi-free market capitalist society, which I believe in the principles of capitalism, but we should use the principles of capitalism in a free market to ensure that the people are prioritized in every policy decision. And so when we have a system that protects and rewards entities that are not serving the people directly in a positive way, that's where I have a problem. It is not anti-free market or anti-capitalist to say, hey, wait a second, you are ripping people off with your lending practices. That's not okay. That's actually government sanctioned, essentially usury. Or this is a monopoly. People don't have another option. We're enabling that. That's a problem. And so I believe if we if we instill conservatism in an authentic sense, that the free market will provide better results for the creation of wealth for the people and not necessarily for...
Well, let me lean into a little bit of one of the things you just described, and that is regarding and involving the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? This administration, they're getting their wish. That's dead. For all intent and purposes, they've decapitated the power that was that bureau, and that bureau was designed and intended for exactly what you're talking about, to where they could make sure the banks aren't applying.
Sure. Yeah. The biggest and best solution to making sure that people have the means that they need. So regardless of industry, is competition. A bureau is never going, some sort of administrative agency is always going to be behind. It's always going to create red tape. The best medicine for an industry that is not serving consumers is competition.
Do you think but don't you think that's an antiquated economic argument? Because what we're seeing is, due to the wealth gap that we both agree is occurring, and the stratospheric wealth that is being created specifically within the tech world in particular.
I call that they're extracting wealth. They're not creating wealth. They're extracting it.
Correct. Well, what's happening is the idea of competition. For example, if you're a really smart little welder that can do the small things and you know how to code a program and you're an engineer, your barrier to entry to like make a chip or to make anything technologically savvy is virtually non-existent. You cannot get in. It's closed off. And there's industry after industry that in today's economic environment, when you take down the protection bureaus and you start to kneecap the SEC and everything else, well, then the environment for mergers, acquisitions, and takeovers, hostile takeovers, et cetera, you're creating less competition. Like that's what we're seeing. We're seeing it in social media. We're seeing it in chips. We now have the government through quote industrial policy buying stakes in shares in Intel.
So let's talk about the financial services industry, one that my opponent has lots of coziness with Wall Street. That's why I call her Wallstreet Wagner, because she's sat on the financial services committee and clearly has a vested interest in making sure that the big banks are well protected. Since Dodd-Frank and since the 2008 collapse, we have seen a reduction of 10,000 banks in this country. These are not, we said after the financial collapse, the Great Recession, that we are going to bail out these banks instead of letting them fail because they're too big to fail. And to do so, we are going to put on protections. I'm using air quotes for these things because it all turned out to be a farce.
Well, you know who's to blame there? That's Obama.
I know that.
And this is where I want to be fair. I want to be fair in this conversation. When the financial,
but it's also George Bush too. So I mean, he laid the groundwork.
Right. It was him allowing these derivatives and all these crazy financial products to occur that all accelerated up to 2008. The bubble bursts,
right?
And then whenever all those that were culpable, that were the CEOs, of the banks,
no perp walks for that,
and they sat in front of that government at the time. Mm-hmm. Obama was the one that let him go.
Sure, absolutely, and people should have gone to prison for that. But so the point is, just from a competition perspective, we've lost 10,000 banks since that, and these are banks that are like the guy that wants to open a deli shop and needs $50,000. That's where he goes. You're not going to Chase or Citi to get. And so when our economy has now been retooled to these big banks, it does not provide for the little man. And the little man is how this country became great. I mean, you have this idea, I want to do this, open this business. That is what made this country special. That's the American dream, aside from buying a home and living free. So I believe in a compassionate and rational way, we increase competition in the banking space, or any other industry, healthcare is no exception, then we increase the likelihood that people can use the monetary system to create wealth as opposed to invest in assets or extract wealth.
But how do you do that though? Because the reality is,
the regulations,
the Wells Fargo right here in our backyard,
sure. Right? The problem is the Wells Fargo's to make it in the banking industry with the amount of red tape and bureaucracy that's required, you have to be a Wells Fargo just to capitalize on the economies of scale to make it make sense.
It is Wells Fargo, though, that is lobbying to ensure that the red tape for new entrants is there.
Correct, exactly. The red tape, they want it because that red tape ensures that somebody else can't take their market share. Because if I can open a bank very easily and provide this service to people, then
so here's the flywheel. Then this is the issue as I see it on this particular topic, and let me know your take on this. You're not a big fan of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because it's government, it's bureaucracy, it's inefficient, and that red tape is debilitating. On the other end of the spectrum, we have macro banks, the Wells Fargos of the world, right, that have so much fucking money and are not restricted from contributing or lobbying, to these Ann Wagners of the world, so that these restrictions are going to stay in place, which is going to squeeze out the small banker, or maybe somebody that wants to create a credit union in a rural community. So
how do I square that?
Yeah, because either you need bureaus to create rules that these for-profit institutions are somewhat handcuffed from restricting new entrants, because if you just say no, we can't have bigger government, but at the same time we're not going to eliminate Citizens United and all these mechanisms in which private money can fund the legislation. Yeah.
So I'm not in favor of eliminating and making this the wild, wild west where but I'm in favor of having it shouldn't be complicated is what I'm saying. Dodd-Frank is just an ungodly amount of regulation that it serves to make it so complex that we can't even instill regulation effectively on smaller banks, and that the only people that can use it to their advantage to create barriers to entry to the marketplace. So I'm suggesting we have a system that is simple, easy to follow, but still has consumer protections. I don't think there's anybody, including the president or any Republican or any sane Republican, I'll say, that's in favor of just elimination of all regulations and making it the wild, wild west. I think we should have regulations, but they should be like simple to follow so that folks can follow it and it doesn't hinder business. There's a difference there. There's red tape that's put together by groups that have a vested interest in making it complicated, which is the vast majority of legislation that goes through Congress or any other legislative body, because the more complicated it is, the more difficult it is. And so that's why you see all these bills that are so muckety-muck. The less muckety-muck, the better.
I'm going to ask you one last question on the finance economic side. Sure. This is a wonky nerd question, but I think, assuming one of Ann's interns happens to listen to this, what's your position on carried interest? Are you in favor of keeping the 2 and 20 loophole in which basically, investors, financial planners, et cetera, they're able to basically carry forward the value of their pay through this loophole in which they're taxed at a capped rate of 20% capital gains, as opposed to, as the money comes out, taxing them at their current tax rates, because that is a massive issue within tax equality within this country.
That's a really good question, and I'm going to answer it with a more broad stroke. I am in favor of vastly eliminating the number of loopholes we have in tax code, because the problem is little man doesn't get to take advantage of those. They don't either know how, or they don't have the means to do it. It only serves a certain percentage of the people.
Yeah.
And we have to get away from that. We have to get away from the complexities that don't serve the masses.
Well, I mean, and we'll take a quick break here along those lines. What it is like when people say, the economy's great, look at the stock market.
Stock market is not a barometer of the economy.
Right. Because how many people are actually in the stock
Correct.
market, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to take 80% of those that, quote, are in it. Realistically, it's in a retirement plan and they can't touch it anyway.
Correct.
So anyway,
Yeah.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to run through some of your campaign's policy positions. So we're going to talk a little bit about foreign relations via America First. I want to get into accountability, term limits, some of that you really lean into. And then the last time we got into, because this is one of your real passion projects, is really kind of that MAHA movement and how you view it through what's happening today. So we'll be right back.
Cool.
Okay, we're back. Quick break is over. I mentioned before the break I wanted to get into a few talking point areas that seem to be really important to you, because obviously if you're going to run for office at a federal level, you got to have a lot of things on your pages. I don't want to get into all of it. I want to get into a few of them. First one I want to start with is the kind of America First moniker, specifically as it pertains to foreign relations. Mm-hmm. Why don't you just take a second and kind of describe what that means to you?
Yeah.
Well, what is America First as it pertains to international relations, foreign policy?
Sure. America First means putting our own people first. Our people are our number one resource. If they're not thriving, if they're not well, our country's not well. And that, I mean that broadly, economically, socially, physically. So America First means putting on your mask before assisting others. It also means that we do not provide foreign aid of any kind to countries who don't really have America's best interest at heart, or who, in exchange for not providing or meeting the needs of our people at home.
Well, the last part, just my whole spidey sense was going crazy when you talked about the last part, where American foreign money going to other countries that don't have our best interest at heart. Just the other day, last week, we sent $20 billion to Argentina. And if you connect the dots, we want to protect our own. We're talking about farmers, soybean farmers in particular. They're dying. They are dying on the vine because the accumulated purchase of Chinese, the Chinese buying soybeans from America, last year was in the range of $12 billion. This year it's at zero.
Right. May was the last purchase.
Correct. So they're at zero. These farmers are telling their stories all over the country that it's over. Like they are, suicide rates are up, the bankruptcy rates are up. They're dying on the vine, and it's it's due exclusively to the tariffs. Bottom line, because that's why the Chinese aren't buying their soybeans. Our government decides on a parallel lane that Argentina's in trouble. Milei is a friend, a political friend of ours. We like what he's doing, the austerity. He is MAGA of Argentina. So they send him $20 billion because their economy is collapsing under his similar policies. What they do with that $20 billion is turn around and create a deal with China, and now they are selling their soybeans to China, and we help supplement and fund it. So when you hear these types of examples, if in fact Americans are your first priority, again, you're going to caucus with who you're going to caucus with. But how do you react? How do you respond to very simple A meets B meets C?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is where it's so clear, and it's frustratingly clear almost. No, at this point, in my opinion, no money is going overseas. Our cities are crumbling. Our people are not well. How does that not computing? What's not clocking? I mean, come on. Look at St. Louis. I mean, look out the window. I can figure out a better place for our tax dollars to go, our future tax dollars, I'll say, because we're so far in the hole. In this city, how far would a couple $1 billion go? I mean, it would be night and day difference. So I can't say it any clearer.
How do you balance, though, between kinetic power, kinetic expenses, that being military spending on bombs and soldiers?
Sure. If somebody wants to buy something from us.
Well, let me finish the premise of the question. Because there's a kinetic expense. That is the $950 billion a year that we give the Defense Department to, quote, be the baddest army in the world. And then there's soft power that we had previously been spending through USAID that creates, different type of leverage globally in confrontational markets, et cetera. Which was to the tune of $45 billion as opposed to 950. And those aren't exact numbers. They just kind of jump out at me as remembering. Isn't there still a place for us, the quote, greatest country in the world, right? We are self-proclaimed, quote, greatest country in the world. Isn't there a place and need for us to still maintain an active engagement, not only in military relationships, i.e. via like a NATO, to try and keep a Russia at bay, who is now flying drones and jets into NATO airspace, and our role in the Middle East, which seems to continue to spiral. We're talking about not stopping nuclear powers. That's where we're at right now. The BRICS coalition of Brazil and Russia, India, China, North Korea, et cetera, their total GDP is now equal to ours. So what used to be a completely imbalanced battle is not imbalanced anymore. So recoiling back into not spending any money / time / attention on these.
Well, I didn't say time and attention.
But all of that costs money.
Sure, but there's a...
How do you balance it? How do you balance it?
In the short term, it's a pause. It's like, hey, can we regroup here? Can we get our finances in order so that we can figure out how we can pay for these things? Because ultimately, I would like to have a scenario in which we're helping other countries, with the caveat that we're only helping countries that align with us through and through. We're not helping countries like... I don't think it's fair for us to subsidize another country's military, who then, because we're subsidizing their military, they have the capacity to instill social policies and economic policies at home that we wouldn't accept here. So that's a problem for me. I mean, that's really across the board. All of Europe has been able to make just terrible economic policies because we are the hand over them, pacifying and guaranteeing their protection. So they can just make bad decision after bad decision because they know Big Brother is going to come in and take care of that.
Let me make an economic pushback argument in regards to that, because the argument is, and I hear this is a typical Republican analysis as to, we've basically bankrolled NATO, we've made them safe, and and they continue to mess up their own economies, et cetera. Well, in spite of bankrolling NATO and spending the vast majority of money on the security system that it is, because of our power, because of that soft power relationship with those governments, with those people, with those consumers, since the onset of NATO, we have become, hands down, the most powerfully economic relevant nation in the history of the world, in spite of spending 2, 3, 4, 5x that
Sure.
Germany's spending.
And
So I think that, like, we need to be honest with ourselves. Did we overpay for NATO and that security that is provided to Europe? I don't know, because the exchange has been, our economy says fuck you to all of them. We have blown them out of the water, and in large part because of our military relationships.
I get that, and I'm not suggesting that it wasn't the best move at the time, but I'm saying from here forward, we need to be more strategic with how we are giving money, how we're lending money, what resources we're selling, buying. There's a way to do this where future generations of this country are not footing the bill for somebody over in the Middle East or Europe or wherever to do whatever crazy programs they want to do that we wouldn't allow here at home.
Well, let me ask you just a really kind of a nerdy foreign policy question here, and this is about, we're going to talk about accountability in a little bit here. Maybe this is a great transition into accountability. We're talking about you would love to see a pause, a reset. Let's get our housing stock right. Let's get our healthcare right. Let's do these things Americans first. But at the same time, we have a government that is trying to make that same claim, but the reality on the street is that is not what's going on. For example, in the Middle East, there are 4 new locations in which Trump enterprises are slated to build properties and projects, each one of them in excess of $500 million and up. One is almost $4.2 billion in Qatar, I believe. How do you feel about accountability whenever we have what's going on in Gaza? We see the death, destruction. We know that October 7th was horrible and everything that Hamas did and what Hezbollah has done for generations, etc. But at the same time, we have an administration right now that is claiming we need to put Americans first. We are going to turn off the spigot, in which we didn't turn off the spigot, where we continue to fund Bibi Netanyahu and his crew. And, oh, by the way, we're going to let them go as far as possible. And on the wake of that boat, we are going to set up real estate development projects while in office. Talk about the accountability that we are not seeing from this administration when it comes to that.
I roll Israel into that same conversation with putting Americans first. I think we've spent aggregate something about $30 billion over the last year or so helping them militarily. Their annual military budget is $25 billion, something like that. They have 9 million people and an economy roughly the size of New Jersey, and a state roughly economy the size of Arizona, and a state the size of New Jersey. I am absolutely 100% on board with Israel defending itself and doing whatever they think is best in their best interest. I support them wholeheartedly. I'm happy to sell them whatever weapons they need to do that. But I have a real challenge. It's really problematic for me to see the U.S. engaging in a continual war in the Middle East that seems to only serve this fueled hatred for America.
Let me ask a very pointed question. Should there be any flag of the Trump organization put in the dirt in Gaza or anywhere else throughout the hot zone that is the Middle East within that immediate region when it comes to a development, an investment while he is in office?
I'm going to find it problematic for a lot of reasons if that were to be the case, but specifically if it, for lack of a better term, becomes sort of gentrified. Those people, the vast majority of those people are not. They've been wrapped up in a foreign in a war that's not their own.
Well, but let's compare and contrast this because everybody wants to get all up in arms, and I agree she should go to prison if she broke the law. But when Nancy Pelosi makes stock trades to the tune of $1 million here, 10 million
or
there,
Ann Wagner,
et cetera.
$3.6 million in May, that sort of
Correct,
stuff. Yeah.
right? Okay, so we're talking about that's corrupt, that's wrong, et cetera. Even though they are investing in U.S. companies, right? I still think it's wrong. What we're talking about is not a $10 million bump. We're talking about billions of dollars of profit in a region, in nations that help support and fly the planes into the World Trade Center.
Yeah, so On its surface, I have a problem with it, and I'll be the first to say if I don't know the answer to something, I want to figure that out, and I'd like to research this more conclusively and be able to get back to you on that. Because one way that here's one way that my mind goes is, who is going to do the investment in that? And if it's private investment in these areas, is that a good thing? And I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be much easier for the U.S. to go in there and say, hey, look, you guys, enough is enough. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to broker a peace deal. We're going to make sure that people are respected. We're going to get people back to living. We're going to get food, healthcare, and everything here. We are going to do what we did during the Cold War. We didn't beat the Russians or the Soviet Union with kinetic energy. We beat them by flooding their air zones with rock and roll and Coca-Cola and Levi's and all this stuff, to the point where the revolution came from within. We showed them what was better. That is not occurring in the Middle East. It could. Now, if we were to do that, there's no reason why McBride and Sons, right? Let's give a shout out local. Why couldn't they go over there? Because if stability is present and there's opportunity, well, then we're allowing the free market, the open market, to go and do what it should. My question is really simple. Should the family of the president be the ones at the front row with the shovel cutting the ribbon?
I will have that will be an area of concern for me if that's the way it ends up. Now, the thing is, though, the risk that it's going to take to develop that, I mean, why anybody would want to do that? And then the question is the U.S. guaranteeing the security of this area? And that's another, however much money we are.
Well, we just the other day, I mean, you saw the news too. We basically this is Congress's job. To your point, Congress is not doing its job, but the Republican Congress is getting out of the way because President Trump said that he made a promise to Qatar that we will be basically their NATO. You know, that is the duties of Congress, because as far as I know, the Constitution says it's their responsibility to approve treaties and to basically fund it, right? We digress. Let's move into the last category here, because I know you're on a little bit of a clock. One of the areas that's really important to you, and you're working on changing the acronym. Last time we talked, you're like, that's what's on there now, but it's a little too toxic. Is basically what you were saying. Yeah. Is MAHA, Healthcare in America. Take a second, give your elevator pitch, give your stump speech.
Sure.
30 seconds. What is MAHA to you, or what is the new acronym? Break the news here. If
we haven't landed on one specifically, but it's going to be the health of our nation, or the healthy people, or something to that effect. Our people, as I've mentioned, are our number one resource. We have to protect the ability for our citizens to not just survive, but thrive. And so much of that is their physical health. We have a health care system that's really a sick care system that does not incentivize for people to live well and be well. We have an agricultural and a food supply that's just riddled with garbage. And the vast majority of Americans have chronic diseases. These are all things that aren't controversial, and we can get into the weeds on vaccines and all that stuff. But my focus, and I'm happy to go there on some of those conversations, but my focus is the simple things that we all agree on: making sure our food is good for us, making sure we have access to good healthcare that is much more focused on preventative care and accessible, affordable, and making sure that our citizens have the ability to live a full and healthy life, free of chronic disease to the extent that that's possible.
So let's talk a little bit about a component of that being the prescription world, that being drugs, et cetera. For the last, 6 to 8 years, the Democrats have been begging for Medicaid, in particular, Medicaid and Medicare, to be able to negotiate directly with drug companies in order to get the best possible price. Congress, through Republican blocs, has said, no, that's not free market. We can't have the government involved in these negotiations. But you and I both know the simplicity of the argument from the Democratic side was like, look, we have a pool of people. These are users. This is healthcare. Sure. And the larger the pool of people, the more negotiating power we have. Therefore, let's negotiate and bring these prices down. That's been stopped. Fast forward to today. The new Trump RX, which is, again, another kind of grifted brand on the potential of doing exactly what the Democrats have wanted the whole time, and that is forcing drug companies to lower their prices. Where's your position on A, the hypocrisy, and B, the role of government when it comes to integrating itself deeper into the healthcare process through prescription drugs?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to unpack in that. Generally, I think that
hypocrisy first. Go there.
Hypocrisy,
hypocrisy.
Of the Republican Party.
Yeah, like
I mean,
it's okay if we put Trump RX as the title, but if we say
course,
Medicaid negotiated,
this is some of the ideas that we're talking about here are been broadly popular for a while, and the hypocrisy also lives on the left because they're like, we don't want this, but it's stuff we've generally wanted. I have I'm always concerned when we put some of these like quasi price control measures in, because then it tends to always backfire. And I'm very skeptical of an organization like Pfizer, and so to have the CEO of Pfizer at this press conference where you're doing all that is like, oh, wait a second, this is not exactly the champion or the victor we want to see. But the real problem, as you mentioned, is congressional abdication of authority and responsibility to do something about this. This is a Band-Aid on the problem. This will not fix the problem. You're already seeing drug companies. So one of the key provisions here is most favored nation pricing. So the U.S. can't pay more than an average of what other nations are paying. Well, guess what Eli Lilly is doing? They're just charging more in the other countries now.
Right.
So the average is going to go up. So we're not going to pay any less. I mean, these companies will find a way to make their money. That's their job. They're beholden to shareholders. That's their primary objective is to make money. So the best way we make a dent in that is to stop allowing these people to rip us off to the extent that they are. It's a Band-Aid on the solution. It's a Band-Aid on the problem. It's not going to really.
Well, let's go big picture, because if we do want to do compare and contrast, you're talking about these most favored nation pricing through Eli Lilly. But if we zoom out and we look at healthcare more broadly, you take the 34 most developed nations in the world, 33
we suck compared to them.
Yeah, 33 have some form of single payer / universal healthcare. And in fact, the countries that have the highest life expectancy rates and the best health outcomes at every stage of the game, from prenatal to children to seniors, have full-blown universal healthcare, primarily the Asian nations and a few Scandinavian ones. We are not that. We are our system.
As a percentage of income, we spend more than them too.
Right. Where would you be? Look, Obamacare, Affordable Care Act was really a Republican-led program from Mitt Romney and crew, and what the Democrats did is basically said, well, we need to actually try to make this thing affordable. Therefore, the mandate, and B, their big win, in my opinion, was pre-existing condition coverage, right? Those two things are kind of define what ACA has become. Where would you be if it was some bipartisan crew, a Josh Hawley and a group of people that were like, look, enough. Insurance companies are making too much money. They're breaking the system. We're losing doctors. And now with our immigration policy, we're losing even more elevated level doctors. Where would you be on a single payer system?
At this point, I'm not in favor of a single payer system. Our system is, one of the beauties of our system is that the free market allows some of the best medicine in the world. If you have access to
let's play pickleball. Let's not play golf here.
I love pickleball.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in on this because this is one of the areas that I really, through my own family experiences and career, it's not that our system is, how did you put it? The free market, it needs to be more efficient. It's not that we need more efficiency, because
we do. It's a deeply inefficient process. I mean,
no, it's definitely for profit. I could just simply show you ticker symbols of the companies that run our healthcare system.
Sure, and I think every hospital system, including BJC out the window here, down the highway, should be taxed. I mean, it's a for-profit company. Every hospital system in this country that's a non-for-profit should lose its non-profit status. So
we've had over 100 years of for-profit healthcare. Through private institutions and private entities, and that competition that is supposed to be the hallmark of a free market capitalist society, right? Where you stay out. So it hasn't worked.
So part of the problem is we consume so much healthcare that is worthless. the average American is not getting the actual care they need, but they're consuming a lot of healthcare. That doesn't mean, so you go to these other countries and they might see their provider a couple times a year, but they're not being forced to, they're not being pressured to take medications or have interventions that just don't serve their actual health. They have a whole system that works to serve their health needs, and that's not what we have here. So if we take our current system and we put it in a single payer system, we're screwed because it's not efficient enough and it's not focusing in the right areas. Now, if you could get me to a point where our system is serving actual health, and we were paying less than we are now at 20% of our GDP, then I would review the.
But couldn't we say that the only metric that would matter would be, number one, healthcare outcomes as far as like service and results, and then number two would be customer satisfaction?
Yeah, but I don't believe that there's another problem in making a single payer system in a country like ours, and that's the lack of homogeneity in the variety of our population. It's in Sweden or whatever. It's a very homogeneous society. They have a very complex.
Wait. But from a scientific standpoint, a heart is a heart is a heart, and a brain is a brain is a brain.
Sure.
What do you mean? How does a diverse population affect healthcare?
It's the vast type of labor too. I mean, their economy is it's niche. They can figure out what works for them, and it's
not niche. It's valued. They decided.
No, what I'm saying is their economy is very specific. They have a few industries that thrive. That's the common thing that's different about every country that has these universal healthcare. Their economies are different, so their people are doing similar things. We have such a variety across this country of health needs based on so much that it makes it very difficult. But I digress, and I want to talk about yes, I agree the outcomes matter. But if we just said, okay, we're going to cancel what we have now, which is essentially health care for all, and that you, through EMTALA and Medicaid, you can go through, and it's a very convoluted process, but you can get it we're going to just cancel all that, and there's a universal payer system. If we don't correct the market inefficiencies that are going on right now, it's going to be a disaster. So what I'm suggesting is let's correct all these inefficiencies and then see where we are.
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit, because when you talk about the difference in the culture and the economy, for example, let's take Sweden. You know, they build Volvos and particle board furniture, and then you take Thailand.
Yeah, but I'm talking the Swedish government knows what works for their people, and Thailand knows what works for their people. It'd be like every state in our country figuring out what works for them.
Yeah, but still, diet and exercise is diet and exercise, and
our country doesn't push that.
Yeah, and appendectomy is no different anywhere in the world.
Sure, but our country doesn't push the basics. 70% of our people are overweight or obese. 60% of children now have a chronic disease. I mean, do you think that that's going to just miraculously get better in a single payer system if we don't change the base and focus on the fundamentals?
Oh, no. Look, there's a big difference between, I think we would be probably 100% in line when it comes to root cause. For example, you talk about kids and obesity in kids, throughout America. Here's an idea. What if we fully funded public schools so that they could have after school extracurricular activities and integrate more of the presidential physical fitness test, things like that? We need to fund our institutions so that the downstream effect of unhealthy, overweight kids turn into unhealthy, overweight teens to adults, etc. And now they're an expense, right? So at some point, it's one thing to say we need to make the system more efficient. It's another thing to say, well, the root cause is we don't give anybody means. We don't give them access to cheaper foods, to more exercise, to more extracurricular activities.
It's culturally kind of anti-American to consume less food and to do more things that are healthy. If we see that we choose to sit on our computers and play video games, and we choose not. So there's a cultural challenge here that we'd have to rectify, and I believe it's possible, but it starts with having honest conversations about what is in our food supply, what we need to do to be healthy.
So let me ask you, because we're getting really close here. I want to ask you this specifically through the lens of Missouri 2. Mm-hmm. Within our area, we have one of the most powerful and successful healthcare networks really in the world. There are a lot of residents in Missouri 2 that are part of that system. Mm-hmm. What's your message to them as a potential candidate as it pertains to healthcare?
You're talking about WashU?
I'm talking
BJC.
about just as surgeons, doctors, nurses, staff, because we're a hub. We are a healthcare hub. And like I said, there's going to be a large percentage of individuals that live throughout that district that touch this industry.
Yeah, I mean, as a healthcare provider myself, one of the problems we've seen is that an erosion of the spirit of the healthcare providers in this country. COVID accelerated it, and it's been happening for quite some time. And that there's burnout. The rates of burnout are just astronomical. People just don't feel like they can actually make a dent. And part of that is because there's no ownership in their end product, because when you work for a big system, you don't really get to determine how you practice. So in my opinion, again, I know this sounds cheap, but it goes back to competition. I'd like there to be more competition in this space. It's problematic that the number one employer in the state of Missouri and one of the biggest hospital systems now in the country, when St. Luke's and BJC combine, is a healthcare system. I mean, if our healthcare system were working, it's certainly not because we don't have enough people working in it.
And look, the demographics don't lie. This is the tip of the iceberg, because the silver tsunami and the acceleration of boomers getting older and older and older and sicker and sicker and sicker, the bed space is going to get limited. So, any closing statements, comments? You can thank me too. If you like. No,
JB, thanks for having me on.
There we go. No, go ahead. Give us a closing shot.
Yeah. If you like anything what I had to say, check me out on social media at Sheridan for Mo on Instagram, Facebook, and go to SheridanforMo.com. We're not going to agree on everything. That's very clear. And I'm not going to agree with everything. And you say, and to the listeners, we're not going to agree on everything. And that's a good thing. And I am happy to have the difficult conversations. I promise I'm going to be better than the status quo. And I promise to never become the status quo. I will leave office before I become the wallpaper, before I become so ineffective that I have somebody like me that feels like they need to challenge.
Ryan Sheridan, man, I appreciate you coming in again.
Yep, you're welcome.
A little asterisk part 2. I look forward to part 3.
For sure, me too.
So keep me posted. I'll be following, and I'll obviously put links to all your pages in the show notes. But good luck with your run, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
All right, tell me you're joking. We're out of here. Quick subscribe. It's free. It's easy. I'll keep these conversations coming. Appreciate your time. Have a good day, whatever day of the week it is. Until next.